Chicago, I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches, and we don't do spirituality shows. We take a tough look at our history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics and identity, and we do sometimes step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's heaped upon us, and we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind you that our audio streams live on our website, and I do encourage you to go to our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show via Facebook Live on our Facebook group pages, and we share them across a bunch of other pages as well. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud after the program, which puts it out as a podcast on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. We take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV, and there you will find the shows that we do here and our short form videos as well. I do encourage people to subscribe to our podcast and to our YouTube channel. And again, I encourage you to go to our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined here in studio by Jake Proud, who is managing our audio and our video. All right, let me get into it. I've been starting off the show talking a little bit about some of the numbers, so I'll do a few COVID numbers. The Navajo territory, Navajo people are still really being racked pretty hard by this. They're up to 3,200 cases, over 100 deaths. And, when we're talking about millions of people and we're talking about the U.S. and the global numbers, those numbers may not seem high, but when you consider them on a per capita basis, proportionally, it is a very high number. And it's not fully explained. We've heard about water being an issue, and there's some cultural reasons. The fact that we live in close-knit family groupings and that kind of stuff. But there's still no reason why why Navajo territories have been hit harder than even other Native territories. It's inexplicable. Navajo have more cases than 9 of the United States. 9 of them. I don't mean proportionally. I mean totally. They have more cases than 9 states. And all 4 U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico. More cases than Puerto Rico. And again, we're talking about a population that, when they talk about enrollment, they talk about 300,000 Navajo. But living in Navajo territory, it's probably under 200,000. And so this is a pretty high number. We continue to see how this plays out, and it's still, it's a tragedy. So I'll keep giving those numbers out. Other numbers I've been talking about. Russia has passed Italy and France, all the other European nations. Only Spain has more cases in Europe than. And, of course, the United States has more cases than Russia. Russia's moved up the list. They have 232,000 cases. Spain is at 269,000 cases. Russia's adding between 10 and 11, almost 11,000 a day. So it'll just be, 3 or 4 days, they will surpass Spain. And then it'll be just the United States and Russia sitting at the top of the list. The UK, they continue to move up the list. They're passing other European countries. They're just slightly behind Russia, but their numbers have started to ebb a little bit. And these numbers ebbing is a little bit what I'm going to talk about as the show goes on. But before I get into it, I am wearing my number 7, power number 7 shirt, which is a Colin Kaepernick shirt. This, I've heard people ask me, does that mean something to do with 7 generations? No, it doesn't. This was Colin Kaepernick's football jersey number. So the shirt is in support of Colin Kaepernick. And I'm wearing it today because of Ahmaud Arbery. And the very reason that Colin Kaepernick was first sitting and then ultimately kneeling was because of what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. and many others, and not just black people, black people who've died at the hands of cops, would-be cops, wannabe cops, half cops, whatever, but just people in color in general. And I was one of the first who was saying, before Colin Kaepernick was even kneeling, he was sitting, and I said, look, I sit with Kaepernick as I stand with Standing Rock. I mean, that's how far back this goes, to when Standing Rock was just cranking up. So yeah, I was among the ones saying, again, before Kaepernick started taking a knee, he was just sitting. And I said, look, I'll sit with Kaepernick and I'll stand with Standing Rock. And, Kaepernick's protest, if that's what people still refer to it as, that his demonstration was for the very reason that's in the news again today with Ahmaud Arbery. And, so I wanted to express my support for the family, for the cause. This isn't just about Black Lives Matter. This is about battling white supremacy. And of course, there is a clear connection to white supremacy in police departments, even police departments with people of color, because we get into this whole notion that there's a culture within the police department that views people of color lesser at a lesser place socially than they do white people, and it plays out. I mean, it plays out. That's why we have missing and murdered Indigenous women. That's why Native people lead in death by cop in most of the age demographics for young men. I think it's only the 16 to 22 or 16 to 20 age group that Native people, on a per capita basis now, I'm talking about. Because, and I always feel like I got to clarify this, but make no mistake about it, more white people are killed by cops than anybody. And why? Because there's more white people. But on a per capita basis, based proportionally on a percentage, Native people lead all lists in terms of number of deaths per million or per 100,000, whatever the grouping you want to use. Native people lead that list, except Black people surpass them on that list in that 16 to 22 age demographic. And that's just, I mean, when asked the question, just like when we asked the question about why people of color are dying at a higher rate than white people with COVID, or mothers are dying at a higher rate in childbirth if you're Black or if you're a person of color. The short answer and most accurate answer is racism. I mean, we can throw all kinds of other social dynamics into the conversation, but racism lies at the foundation of every one of those social dynamics, including poverty, including all of the other substance abuse issues, all the things that you want to try to say, well, it's because of this, and this. Yeah, but isn't that caused by impacted by racism? Sure, it is. So again, I wear my Colin Kaepernick shirt in support of Ahmaud Arbery, and in support of still supporting Colin Kaepernick. So I wanted to mention that at the beginning of this show. All right, so what's the topic? The topic is: are you ready to go back to work? Are you ready to reopen? There's an irony here, because the right, meaning the political right, including all those morons with guns, storming the capitals of various states, saying, that they're tired of being enslaved or being prisoners of war or having their freedoms stolen, whatever their hyperbole has been. They were the ones saying, look, we got to end this shutdown. We got to open the state. And the left was pretty much saying, no, we're not there yet. In fact, all the doctors were saying, no, we're not there yet. But now, the entire left has moved to the right. They've moved to the right to accommodate their financial concerns. Look, to suggest that somehow, and they're really playing games here. Nobody's going to come out and say, well, there is a cost-benefit analysis to how many people we're willing to let die because of this disease. I mean, that's the conversation that isn't being had. It's what's being they're using euphemisms. What's the one that they say? There's a whole bunch of them, but I keep saying, well, there's got to be a balance between the economy and safety. That balance means how many lives, how much of an increase in the spread of COVID-19 and the deaths caused by it. How much of that can we give, and still, try to regain some sort of economic, push. I mean, that's what it is. Jake said before the show, remember when they were claiming that Obamacare was all about promoting death panels, where a series of people who would sit together and decide who can live and who can die? That's what's happening now. This group of so-called doctors who may or may not be being heard by, and this isn't just Trump's orbit. Every governor has a team of doctors that's telling them, here's the criterion for opening up. There's not a single one of them who can go on record and say, look, some people, we're going to increase a certain number of deaths by opening up. I mean, they all know that. They just won't say it. And so, again, it's ironic that you have these people making these decisions, life or death. Look, and I still have my own mixed feelings about the strategy that was employed in the first place, especially when you consider 30% of all the people who've died, 50% in New Jersey, but 30% of all the people who've died in the United States were in nursing homes. I mean, how could they have not been quarantined? If you could have reduced the number by 30%, if you could have nipped this thing from entering into nursing homes, I mean, that is absurd to me. And and that has nothing to do with social distancing, really. I mean, you could have just quarantined nursing homes, made sure that staff wasn't, bringing the disease in. I mean, I don't know. Some of this stuff is bizarre to me. But again, the question is, are you ready? Because ready or not, all you people who've been collecting unemployment and in some ways financially doing just as well not working as when you were working. Well, now you're not going to have a choice, because once they start opening, you're not going to say, I'm still not ready. I'm going to stay home and collect unemployment. They're going to say, no, you're not. No, you're not. Once we throw that switch, you've got to go back to work. Yeah, we don't care how safe you feel. We're going to tell you how safe you have to feel. So here's the deal. In New York State, there are 3 districts, and it's not just counties. This is districts of New York, and they've got 9 or 10 districts in New York. They've chopped it up, and like the Western District has 5 counties. Predominantly, it's Erie County and Niagara County. Those are the 2 bigger ones. But there's 3 districts that, according to Cuomo and his staff, have met the criterion to go to phase 1 reopening. Now, those 3 districts are the Southern Tier, and it does include the Allegheny Territory. That's in the Southern Tier. So the Southern Tier, Finger Lakes. Now, Finger Lakes includes the areas around the Finger Lakes: Skew Lake, Seneca Lake, Skinny Atlas. All of those. Again, the Finger Lakes from Rochester, essentially down to the Southern Tier. That includes where Del Lago Casino is, and Finger Lakes Racino, their racetrack casino. And the third region is Mohawk Valley, which is like the other side of Utica, like Fonda, along the thruway between Albany and say Utica or something like that. So those are the 3 regions that phase 1. Now, when you look at the news associated with this, it doesn't tell you what can open. It gives you some generalities about what's going to open in phase 1. Not all the specifics, so it's a little bit hard to know yet. But those 3 districts of New York, and these are the only 3, are ready to reopen. And like I said, there is implication here, because once these things are no longer, within, are calling for a shutdown or stay at home, that means now when you stay at home, you're staying at home, that's on you. You're not going to stay at home and collect unemployment unless you don't have a job to go back to. So So there we have it. I mean, whether you like it or not, whether you're ready or not, whether you're comfortable or not, there are people in decision making positions that are going to decide whether these regions open up, or when these regions open up. Now, of course, a phase one opening does have a caveat to it. If they open up these three regions and they start to see a spike in cases or hospitalizations or deaths, I mean, there's a number of metrics they're using to measure this thing. They may scale it back and close it. But it's no longer going to be the state doing it. Now it's the region by region, I think, that gets to make the call. Not county by county. And I got to be clear there, because you can see a little bit of a tension growing in the Western New York district, because Erie County doesn't seem to be making, reaching those milestones for reopening. But other counties, like Niagara County, for instance, they're saying, yeah, we're in good shape. We're ready to reopen. But they can't, because they're part of the Western New York region. So now there's tensions between counties, because some counties are saying, look, we're being closed down because of Erie County. Well, yeah, but you're part of that same region. But anyway, that's what's going on with this thing. Now, of course, the big question, and I mentioned Delago, does have to do with gaming. When does gaming open up? And it's a little unclear, because when you read the news and the releases that came out of the state, they don't mention gaming specifically. And I went on Delago's website, and I even went on Seneca Allegheny's website, and I haven't talked to any Seneca Nation officials, but clearly opening up gaming is something that's coming. Now, from a Seneca Nation standpoint, I've mentioned it before, but let's be clear here. Gaming is the number one source of public finance for the Seneca Nation. And there's a lot at stake here. I mean, yes, the Seneca people get annuities. They get a check monthly based on the gaming corporations, essentially what the rent that they pay essentially to the Seneca Nation. So it's like a lease payment, I guess. But it's based on gaming and obviously gaming being open. And that's starting to, having 2.5 months or however many weeks it's been now since March 15th, I guess, 2 months shut down. It doesn't take long to go through whatever money you've had stockpiled or saved up. It doesn't take long to go through it. And so the Seneca Nation obviously needs to open back up, but of course they've got to open up and make money. And so if they open back up and nobody comes, then now you're burning even more revenue away. And of course, the state's got to be in the same place. I mean, I think about the Lago casino. This is a casino that wasn't very successful. It couldn't make enough money to pay its debt service. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the state licensed gaming operations that were already somewhat marginal, how they are making it through this last couple of months. Obviously, they probably bought some time with their debt service and that kind of thing. But because the calculus here is, when you open back up, do you go back to making money right away? I mean, how long is that ramp up period before the revenue starts to be enough to justify? Because here's what's going to happen: you're going to have increased staff. You're going to have some of the seats restricted for social distancing. You're going to have downtime to clean machines and stuff like that. There's probably going to be, I've seen some pictures from Vegas that have like plexiglass partitions by every seat, whether it's at a slot, at slot machines, or whether it's at table games. It's going to be a different animal. And so what is that going to impact? How's that going to impact, the patronage there? We don't know. We're in an area that it's that we nobody's ever been before. So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. And the other thing with casinos is there's usually entertainment venues. I can see the gaming coming back, but I can see the entertainment not coming back for a while, because then now you're sitting there to watch a concert or a show. I don't see that happening for a while. So this is going to be interesting. I mean, and of course, the state's going to open up, and their gaming facilities, the state licensed facilities, the Lago, the Racinos, the Senecas will have one of their casinos will be in an area that the state has opened up, but the other two, where do they sit in limbo here? I mean, will they open up in defiance of the rest of Western New York? I mean, there are other two casinos that are in the Western New York district. Will they open up in advance of that? I doubt they will. But so they're essentially being held hostage, and these are two of their flagship. These are the two flagship gaming operations. The Allegheny, not taking anything away from Allegheny, but that is their least profitable of their three gaming facilities, and that's the one they're going to be opening up. Now, you could argue, well, if it opens up, they'll draw from the crowds who can't go anyplace else, and so maybe it'll be a boon for Seneca Allegheny. Obviously, there are probably a number of people who want to go back to work. As far as full disclosure here, my son works for Seneca Gaming Authority, so he's anticipating being called back to work soon. He's not a casino staffer, but he works for the Gaming Authority. So I know there's a number of people they're going to have to open this up, and the immediate thing is going to be a big increase in payroll, and they're going to get hit by that big increase in payroll nut in advance of the revenue catching up. So this is going to be interesting. Now, I've been talking about this in terms of from the business side, but what about the patron side? And not just for gaming, just in general. Where are many people sitting in terms of what are they prepared to do? I mean, are you prepared to sit at a restaurant and be served? I mean, have you missed it that much that's what you're longing for? Some businesses have been open. People are still going to Walmart and Home Depot and Lowe's, and there is a lot of retail that has been open. So not everybody's been locked up in their homes, but there hasn't been a whole lot of entertainment. Movies, obviously, gaming, entertainment. Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of entertainment other than what you can pick up and bring home and stay entertained. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And we're getting into summertime, or springtime. I know it's only 40 degrees outside, but it really is springtime. But we're getting there, and so the anticipation is not just the great outdoors, but some of the other things that you do in the summertime, and a lot of it's social gathering. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think the big thing that, and again, that Jake and I were talking about is how odd it is that even the left is leaning. I mean, if you were to look at the numbers and understand how many people are still dying, what the hospitalization rates are, the fact that you have some regions that are still growing on a day-to-day basis in terms of number of cases. Yeah, New York, there's no question that the New York numbers seem to be lessening. But I've said from day one, I sometimes wonder about the accuracy of those numbers because of where they're coming from. They're only coming from confirmed by test, data for the most part. And they're, every day another story comes out and says, well, we think there was a gross undercount in the number of people who died because of this number or because of this consideration or any number of things. And of course, we also every day get another piece of news that suggests that it's not just a respiratory problem anymore. This isn't just attacking the upper and lower respiratory system. It is, it's not just damaging lung cells. It's damaging other vital organs. It's causing blood clots. The latest thing is children are sustaining symptoms that are similar to the Kawasaki syndrome, which has to do with inflammation of joints and swelling of tongue and throat, and they're having trouble breathing, not because of their lungs, because they can't get air through the throats, eyes swelling and all this. So now children that we thought were pretty much immune from and I don't mean immune in the sense of immunity, but are somewhat protected from the worst symptoms of COVID-19, are now developing some of these other parallels anyway. Because with these Kawasaki syndrome cases, they said, we haven't been able to determine that COVID-19 is causing them, but every of the handful of children who have died, and this is from 5 to 16-year-olds, that have died, all of them had COVID, tested positive for the virus. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out there's a connection there. But you've had, again, strokes, blood clots, even they were calling it COVID toes, where your toes get numb because of blood clots in the extremities. So there are more and more features or characteristics or symptoms or ailments, I should say, not even symptoms, because these are almost specific. I mean, a stroke is a stroke. I mean, these are ailments, not just symptoms. So more and more ailments are presenting themselves as a result of this. And I know there's still the ongoing debate on where this comes from, who's responsible for it, and and you can listen to the moron in the White House, trying to take his shots at China still over this whole thing. But at the end of the day, I always come back to the numbers, and I say for anybody to stand up and say that the United States is the envy of the world because they have tested a higher number of people. Well, yeah, you've tested, but you've also have a higher number of deaths and it's not even close. I mean, even countries with larger populations like China and India don't have the deaths that the United States has. At least they're not reporting them. So and again, I've said it before on the show, 42 other nations have tested a higher percentage of their population than the United States has. So the United States can brag about, well, we've tested, we've given 7 million tests. Yeah, but you have 330 million people. You still haven't reached 3% of your population. And other countries have. I mean, some other countries have dramatically, tested dramatically more, a higher percentage of their people. So, now we're also starting to hear a little bit more about, tests that, false negatives. We're starting to wonder about the news that comes out of the White House, how many the White House staffers who test positive. But were they negative until this final test, or were they false negatives? And so the veracity of some of the tests aren't necessarily 100. They're certainly not 100%. But the ones they're testing some of the folks in the White House with is probably the least accurate. It's like in the 80s percentage of accuracy. So look, there's a lot that has yet to play out with any of this stuff, and of course, the idea of trying to get people to go back to work is pinning a certain amount of hope that the work is still there. There are companies that have not and will not survive this, even as they try to open up. There are companies that are probably thinking, all right, if another stimulus package comes and if I can get this much dollars and this much and this and this, and I get the same work staff back and we can get up to our level of efficiencies, we can probably make a go. But you're not going to know till you try. And some of these companies aren't going to make it. I mean, and we're talking about everything from manufacturing to retail to service industries, all kinds of industries that are going to that have been shut down, but are not going to be able to be jump started. And so it's gonna take a while to play out. All right, hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break and we'll come back and get into a little bit more on some of these same subjects. But think about it. Are you ready to go back to work? Ready or not, you might have to, or may have to try. So we'll see. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll be right back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Look, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, the folks at Grand River Enterprises and Native Wholesale Supply, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, and look, any of you who from time to time drop a check in the mail or take some measure to support the show. And support isn't just about helping us financially so we can buy more stuff. There is that, but some of it is just sharing the videos, sharing the audio, the podcast, offering your comments, letting me know you're there so we can, look, I'm going to do this if there's 10 people watching or listening, or whether there's 10,000. It's just, I've been doing this for, we're in our 10th year. We're almost finishing up our 10th year here. So we're about to enter our 11th year. And I just think that somebody has to have these conversations, because honestly, I always felt like if I can encourage a conversation that kind of leaves any connection to the show but continues on, then I've done my job. And when I do hear people say, I learned something from your show, and it armed me to have the conversation that I had last week, or the conversation I'm going to have next week. I mean, that to me is part of why I do this show, why I do the New York show, and we're gonna keep doing it. But it helps when we get the support from you, the listener, whether you're supporting by spreading the word or whether you're supporting by spreading the wealth. So again, I appreciate those of you who support what we're doing here. A couple of things. Before I get back totally on track, we're always seeing these battles play out, and even as we look at the possibility of opening back up, like gaming, for instance. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that the Seneca Nation is still completely engaged in a battle with New York State. I don't care how much popularity Cuomo gained during this COVID-19 pandemic. As far as we're concerned, he's still an ass, and so are these other governors who are trying to squeeze money out of. I mean, we finally created a few places that we can generate some sort of economic growth or stability, and we are literally being extorted by the states for gaming revenue. I mean, it's absurd, and that's not the only place that we find ourselves at odds with the states. We always have these battles on where the state feels their authority are, where it lies, and some of what's playing out in South Dakota is another example of that. The governor in South Dakota is literally trying to tell the native territories in South Dakota, you cannot put checkpoints. You can't question people, stop traffic, and question people coming onto your territory. I mean, this is absurd. I mean, there are places all over the world before you can walk into a building, an airport, a facility where somebody checks your temperature, asks you if you have any symptoms, asks you why you're going to where you're going. So the idea that several of the native territories in South Dakota, they put up checkpoints, and I want to be clear here. They're checkpoints. They're not blockades. They haven't bulldozed up the road. They've literally stopped people coming in and said, what's your business coming onto our territory? Have you had any symptoms? Where are you coming from? Where are you going to? How long will you be staying? These kinds of things. And the governor of South Dakota is saying, I'm demanding that you take those down. There was even some suggestion that she was threatening to bring in the National Guard. I mean, it is so absurd to listen to these white folks pretend that they can still dictate what we do on our territories. And look, my last show I talked about how we've reclaimed our identity, and we aren't as submissive to the states. We aren't as submissive to the federal government. But they don't know that. They still think that they can just run us over, and they can extort money from us. They can tell us what we can and can't do to protect our own people. And look, this stuff is important. I mean, we have problems on our territories because of, and many of those problems are caused by people who come by. I mean, part of what, even looking at Navajo territory, one of the reasons, one of the causes for the massive spread of some of these of COVID-19 and this pandemic is because there are when you talk about food deserts, I mean the deserts that exist in Navajo territory are for everything from water, food, medical care, just basic services. So our populations who may live in close quarters have to leave and go to a place to get access to these services, and white people are making runs at those grocery stores, at those services as well. So the idea that we haven't been able to, when we need to isolate. Look, there was no problem with isolating us to send us the hell out of your way. Move us off our territories. Get us out of sight, out of mind. But when we want a little bit of isolation to protect ourselves, now the governors are going to say, oh, hell no. We're not going to let you do that. So, look, coming up soon, I was just talking to my buddy James about it a little bit. I'm gonna look at bringing in somebody from South Dakota to talk about where this is going. I think the governor, is bluffing to a large extent. It sounds like even some of the South Dakota state legislature has, tried to offer some pushback. It's just amazing to me that even in a time like this, the racism and the conflict between peoples has to, is right there in the front. So whether you're talking about Ahmaud Arbery, or whether you're talking about Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, or these battles over gaming revenue, it just never ends. It just never ends. So, look, I just wanted to mention that because we are going to look at trying to do a show. I also want to try to explore a little bit more of just what is going on in Navajo territory. Even as I watch some of the mainstream media tackle it, they don't get to the core issues. They say the same kind of thing. Oh yeah, 30% don't have running water. Yeah, but you're not. That doesn't explain how it is the disease gets there and then spreads. So I'd like to delve into that a little bit more. So we'll be looking at that on some future shows. A couple of things. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be on Living for the City with Michael G. Haskins on WBAI. I should be on at 11 o'clock, and I may be on for 15, 20 minutes. Michael G. was my studio engineer when I was on Thursday mornings. Now that I'm in Thursday afternoons, I'm with Reggie Johnson. But Michael G. is somebody I go back with for years. We did a few events together. He's one of my favorite people at WBAI, and he used to do the morning show at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I've joined him. I used to join him on that show from time to time, and but his producer got a hold of me, and so I'm gonna team up with Michael G. Haskins in the morning. So if you go on to WBAI, I'm hoping the live stream's working. I know they've had some website issues, but if you go to WBAI.org, you should be able to stream the live the show. So if you're not in New York City listening on 99.5, you should be able to go to www.wbai.org and listen. And look, you can go to, if you ask Alexa play WBAI, that's how I listen to it at home. I just ask my smart speaker and it pulls it in. So yeah, tomorrow 11 a.m. Tune us in. Michael G is a classy guy, and I always love sharing a conversation with him, and that should be kind of interesting. One of the things that we will talk about is what's going to come up on Thursday. On Thursday, when I do my WBI show, which is Thursday afternoons, and this week is going to be at 4 o'clock. I've got Shawnee Rice who's going to join me, and now Shawnee was my co-host until she had some career choices and some things that she was doing. So she found me a replacement for her, and so now I've got Regan DeLoggins, who's my co-host. But we've missed Shawnee, and of course she's become a good friend of mine. Checked in with her a little bit just when this thing was first, this COVID-19 was first starting to kick up, and then I learned that she actually tested positive, that she became sick with COVID-19. And so she's going to join us on Thursday, and she's going to talk about how it is that she came to be. The irony is, I did my last show in New York on March 5th. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of talking about shutting down anything on March 5th. Most of the shutdowns didn't come, till significantly after that. But that was the last time I went to New York. Shawnee left New York just a week later on March 13th. And she didn't get out of there fast enough. And again, if you tune in and join us on Thursday, you'll get a chance to, if you remember Shawnee being my co-host, you'll get a chance to catch up with Shawnee a little bit, and we'll talk about what she went through and what she's still doing now that she has recovered, and what her plans are in terms of using her antibodies and that kind of stuff. So anyway, join me on Thursday. That's at 4 o'clock. Again, on WBAI, we will stream it here on Facebook, as we always do. and of course it'll go up as a podcast. In fact, I may even take the audio. I might get the sound check from my appearance with Michael G tomorrow, and maybe we'll throw it up as a podcast as well. So we'll see what we do there. But anyway, that's some of what we got coming up, and I wanted to mention those things. Look, as I said earlier, we're heading into our 11th year here, and we've played around with with format a little bit. When we first got started, we were on commercial radio. We were kind of a call-in show. We eventually saw less wisdom in continue to buy airtime, so we built our own studio here on the Cattaraugus territory of Seneca Nation, and continue to do the show. I think we've been doing this for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. So. And we separated. At first we were doing a 1 hour show, then we went to a 2 hour show, and now we do 2 1 hour shows per week. And the question is, what do we do to come up with content each show? And that's always a challenge, because we always run the risk, because we know we have to repeat some things. I mean, some things that we talk about, historical events, anniversaries, some of the issues we face they're reoccurring issues. So we always run the risk of repeating ourselves, and it's a risk that I'm completely willing to take, because I also know that somebody who's listening to us today may not have been listening to us a year ago. So I don't mind covering previously covered ground, and the way we rehash some of this stuff sometimes change, or the circumstances around our conflicts with the state and the federal government change. The conflict may be the same, but where we are, as I talked about in the last show, we're in a different place. As Native people, we're in a different place than we were in the 70s. We're certainly in a different place than we were in the 90s. And we always have to wrestle with how we take on some of these battles. I mean, how aggressive do we be? I mean, and how when we talk about fighting for something like what we call sovereignty, the idea that we have the power and the right to do certain things, there's a degree of absolutism that we have to temper sometimes. I mean, there are battles that are we can fight them all, and use every resource we can to fight on all fronts, or we pick and choose. And I think we never concede a battlefront, but I think we do have to sometimes pick and choose the ones that we're going to advance. And that's part of that's an economic decision sometimes when it comes to what we're fighting for in terms of economic development. Gaming is one of those things that we were persistent in. Tobacco, another issue that we are always persistent in. I think we need to have some of that same persistence as we take on other issues, social justice issues, economic development issues, environmental issues, and we start to see more and more of that. But it isn't always easy to I don't know to present something fresh when some of these battles that we've been engaged in are just decades or in some cases centuries old. So again, I'm not. This isn't an apology. It's an explanation. We really do need to have these conversations, and it's not just that I need to have the conversation. You need to have the conversation. Part of the reason for presenting some of this information, especially the facts and the data, when we give you historical events or we tell you some truths that you maybe never heard before. Look, I've got friends who are on Facebook who said, "Man, I never considered that before. I didn't know that before." And I'm, of course, it's easy to cite some of the historical events like Lincoln executing 38 Dakota, but you go through some of the history and you realize how long we've been doing some things, and how long we have had success in a certain area that most people were just completely unaware. Most people don't know where some of the areas that Native people have been successful in, and part of that challenge is, how do we pursue success in an area without giving up our identity? So when we talk about becoming educated or, getting into, the medical profession or some sort of scientific field, how do we continue to carry something forward? I know as I do this show, as I go to New York and I do a show in the city, or as I give speaking engagements, I know that I'm not a skilled orator. I'm not coming up to a microphone to be a polished performer. For me, there's a passion in what I try to bring to the subject matter, but there's also an experience. There are plenty of people who can stand up on a stage and talk about what they learned. But and I've talked about this before. Real education comes from what you experience, not from what you read, not from what you think. You can reason something out, and you can read something and remember it, and you can connect the dots, and that's great. That's critical thinking. But until you apply some of that critical thinking to your experience, and then you realize, if you do this, this, and this, we get to a different place. That's the experience we're talking about. I mentioned before, Jake and I are going to do a little bit of a retrospective, looking back not just at 1990, but the 1990s, because it's important to realize how a series of events changed what we did as Native people, how we advanced ourselves on many of these economic and political, social justice issues, how we get to a place that we feel so strongly that we were in the past we may not have stood up and fought. We may have just backed away. We hear this all the time even when we talk about the mascot issue. Oh, well, how come you weren't arguing about this 30 years ago? Yeah, we were. You just didn't hear us then. And so part of it is we have different tools at our disposal. We have this. We have social media. We have podcasts and YouTube videos and live streaming. We have social networking. We have all these tools that we never had before. We have the ability to get our voices out in ways that we never had before. But we're also getting to a place where people are starting to listen a little bit more. Look, there's a lot of things that I had to say 10 years ago that completely fell on most people's ears, deaf ears, as I should say. I mean, they just, no, they wouldn't hear it. And even today, look, there's a number of people who might embrace the message that I deliver, but they're still troubled by the messenger for whatever reason. And look, I'm not here to be a popular person. I'm here to try to present the conversation on all of these issues. So whether we're talking about going back to work in the face of a pandemic, and what does that mean? Or whether we're talking about how we take the next steps fighting the state, or whether it's over taxation or gaming revenue, we need to have these conversations. And there's ignorance out there, but there's also willful ignorance. There are people out there who simply don't want to even entertain our viewpoints on a full range of topics, and on a full range of topics that affect us. It's not like we're trying to, redesign the White House here. I don't. Frankly, you guys can elect whoever the hell you want to elect out there. But from my standpoint, from a Native standpoint, I'm saying we always have to be prepared for the worst. We've got to be prepared for the fact that Donald Trump could win another 4 years. We also have to be prepared for the fact that Joe Biden could turn out to be as bad as Donald Trump as far as we're concerned. Because this isn't about right versus left. We've got a Democrat, sitting there in Albany, or we don't, but the state does. Their governor's a Democrat, and the president's a Republican. And you know what? They both are asses. And, so while some people might love some of these guys on some issues, whether, people think that Trump is good for business, which he isn't, but if they think that, or they like his position on, on abortion or whatever the hell, seems to attract you to this moron, or whether you think, Andrew Cuomo has attributes that you're drawn to, that's fine for you. But we as a people who are trying to survive in an atmosphere that is still steeped in 200 years of oppression, we're going to have a different view on these guys. And all we're saying is that you should at least understand where we're coming from. You don't have to buy into it. You don't have to feel what we feel. You should just know that we feel it. And from the Native standpoint, we have to be careful. I mean, because look, we are going to have some success in a number of areas, but a lot of times that success does depend to a certain extent on the allies, the non-native allies that we have. Certainly, we need to unify and stand together, which is very problematic all by itself. Look, we watched the whole Cayuga thing play out. We've seen dissension in so many territories over the years. Longhouse versus elected systems, even with Longhouse, Handsome Lake versus Great Law. But community to community, political parties, whatever. Assimilated versus some that are probably a little less assimilated. There's a lot of tensions. But we need to make sure that we don't try to fight everybody on every issue. And it's not to say we don't stand up. But I do worry sometimes that I don't want anybody to interpret everything I say as, oh, he hates Whitey. Because that's not true. I hate white supremacy. Not all white people are white supremacists. But there's an awful lot of tolerance for racial bias amongst white people. So this is kind of the message. So, as we face conflicts, especially where we become the victim of something because of a white man or a system that is where racism is part of that system, whether it's the police or the Justice Department, or whether it's just certain neighborhoods, we have to be better than them. So that means that we have to be more. I don't mean even more talking about diplomacy here. I'm saying that we've got to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap that a white supremacist falls into, or somebody who just hates people because of the oppression they experienced, or the intergenerational trauma that they've experienced. There's a lot of reason that we could resent white folks, and most of those reasons are pretty justifiable. But it doesn't mean we should take it out on everybody who's white. I think we do have to make sure that we leave the door open for allies. We have to always create the opportunity to have a conversation, even with the people we don't agree with, and whether that's another native person or whether it's a non-native person. Because the best thing that we can do is enlighten somebody. Now, I realize, as I said earlier, there's a difference between ignorance and willful ignorance. And, part of our challenge is to figure out who are the people that we're wasting our time with. And who are the people that as we bring them in, we understand the role that they have is not to control our process as allies, but it's to educate the people that they are closest to. I'm not looking for white allies to come into our territories to run things. I'm not looking for white allies to provide me even legal counsel or consultation or any of that stuff. What I'm looking for white allies is to stand up to some of the white people who aren't our allies. So I just felt like, as I look at some of the tensions that we are constantly experiencing, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of who we are and the people who perhaps we can rely on some help from. I'm not asking for charity here. But I think there are people within the non-native communities, black, white, Europeans, wherever. I think there are people who are interested in understanding a little bit where we come from. And I don't mind educating them. But again, I want to make it clear. I'm not looking to, this isn't missionary work. I'm not looking to gain followers or to bring people in. No, it's just, educating. It's about education. So, again, I want to remind people, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., I'll be on WBAI. You can go to WBAI.org. And you can catch me on with Michael G. Haskins and Living for the City. On Thursday, we will be back here in studio, and we will be doing Let's Talk. Regan DeLoggins, my co-host, and I, we're going to welcome back Shawnee Rice, my previous my previous co-host, and we're going to talk about her experience going through as a young person being infected by COVID-19, what she experienced, what she went through physically, and where she's at now. So that should be an interesting story. You know, again, I want to thank you guys for listening and sharing some of the conversations that we have here. We'll see you back here Thursday, and then again on Saturday. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.